Hey everybody, my name is John from American Eagle Plumbing. Today, we're gonna be rebuilding this toilet and we're gonna go through a step-by-step process as to how that's done. Come along. Have you ever had or woken up to in the middle of the night the sound of your toilet turning on all by itself, where it's almost as if a ghost is flushing your toilet? Well, a ghost really isn't flushing your toilet. That's because there's something going on inside this toilet tank that's causing water to empty out into the bowl of the toilet. So we're gonna rebuild the guts of this toilet tank and stop that leak from happening. The first thing that you're gonna do is turn off the water. So reach behind your toilet and turn off your water supply to the toilet. Most of the times the water supply is hand tight. Go ahead and remove your water supply connection to the bottom of the toilet fill valve. Next, you're gonna remove and gain access to your toilet tank. Set your toilet tank off, preferably on the floor on an old towel so that you don't bump it and it knocks it off, causing this to break, because you probably want this again. After we shut off our water supply and remove the water, after we shut off the water to the toilet and removed our water supply, the next thing to do is we gotta empty out what would be water in this toilet tank. Obviously, in this case, there isn't, but most of the times that water supply is gonna be about this high inside your toilet tank. Go ahead and lift up your trip lever and let almost all of it go. And then once that is pretty much empty, you're gonna wanna take a shop vac or a small vacuum and suck out the remaining water that's in here so that you don't create a mess when you start removing these toilet parts. When removing the toilet tank parts, you can do it in a couple different order. So the common parts inside a toilet are gonna be your fill valve. This is what sets the level. The common parts in the toilet are gonna be your fill valve. This is what sets the water level inside your tank. The flush valve, this is what lets and allows water to go into the rim of your toilet, causing it to actually flush. Your toilet flapper, and then you have tank to bowl bolts, and underneath that is a tank to bowl gasket. Today, we're gonna be removing all of the parts and then using a common rebuild kit to put it all back. Obviously, the toilet is in a much more awkward position when it's sitting on the floor, but I want to do this from a more elevated position so you can kind of get a bird's eye view as to what's going on underneath the toilet. We're going to remove these 3 nuts right here, and this whole tank will lift off the base of this toilet bowl. So I'm taking a 1/2-inch nut driver with a shallow shank, just loosening all these nuts and be able to take this off here. Sometimes these nuts don't like to come off. Now that we have those nuts removed, we can pull this tank, will come completely off the bowl of the toilet. So underneath here is our tank to bowl gasket. This is what seals the tank to the bowl, and the water flows from the underneath the flapper. It goes into this is where the water goes into the toilet. So if I were to lift up the flapper, you might be able to see that right through there. So there is how the water goes out of the tank into the bowl of the toilet, causing that flush. So on this design, these nuts or bolts will just push right out. We'll set those aside, and this tank to bowl gasket just pushes right on out through these holes. Now this gasket is held on by a nut. This is what holds the flush valve onto the tank, and that's what the flapper sits on. So for this, I'm gonna use my Big Baby Blues. These Big Baby Blues you can get at your local home improvement store. We just about lost our tank. Come on, there we go. And that will fit right in here. We're gonna stop the video, and I will. So I ended up flipping this toilet tank so it sits more flat, a little easier to work on. A lot of times if I'm doing this out in the field, I will set it on my knees and I'll just sit so I have a nice working surface. So I take my Baby Blues and I'm able to on-spin this nut, which is never easy, but it is coming. Gotta hold it on the inside too. There, it's coming. There's a couple common causes as to why toilets run. Sometimes it's the toilet flapper that has gone bad and it's warped. And sometimes it is the gasket that we're trying to remove. So this here is our toilet flush valve. And this gasket here, right here, this gasket can go bad and water can weep through this opening down into the bowl of the toilet. So that's kind of the reason why this flush valve needs to be replaced. And it's always a good idea when you have to replace your flush valve that you end up just replacing all the toilet parts parts so that when you put it back together, it's good. So now our toilet is pretty much emptied on the flush valve. And now we're gonna remove the toilet fill valve. So the toilet fill valve also has a nut. A lot of times those are gonna be hand tight. Sometimes I like to give them a quarter turn of a channel locks just to be safe. This one's hand tight. So we'll take this nut off and then just pull that out. And this is the fill valve. So this again sets the water level inside the toilet tank. All right, so here we are. We got our toilet flapper, which we're gonna remove from, this is called the trip lever. This is what engages or starts your toilet to flush. And this is the other common issue causing toilets to run, is that this seal right here, it starts to cup or get warped. This one's pretty warped, so this is a common thing. But if you replace a flapper and your toilet still runs, then you gotta do a complete toilet rebuild. All right, this is what the inside of a toilet looks like when all the toilet guts are removed. I recommend always trying to put back factory parts to the toilet. If you don't have them or don't have access to it, you can always get a universal rebuild kit. This is what this is, and this should work just fine on this particular toilet. This is our new toilet fill valve. Now these are adjustable, and you want to adjust it to the level of your flush valve. Now I'm going to grab this one. This is our old one. So the flush valve there's a little sticker on most of these. It's water level. You always want to set your water level right to the below of this. If your water is too high, or if your fill valve fills the water up too high, water is going to go into this overflow tube down into your bowl, again causing your toilet to run. So what we're going to do is install our toilet fill valve first. This particular one has an adjustable overflow. There's different heights of toilet tanks, and at the moment we'll just leave that at the lowest setting. It already comes with a new toilet flapper, brand new, with a chain. We'll disregard that. Take off the nut and the cardboard washer. This gasket goes in between the toilet flush valve and the ceramic or the toilet tank. So that stays on there like that, and we're going to insert it through the big opening. Spin this around. Cardboard gasket goes on next, and our nut. And you're going to get that really nice and snug. It's important to pay attention to the orientation of the valve inside the tank. Primarily so you're not blocking these toilet tank to bowl bolts right here. So you get that in the right position. Get that hand tight, nice and snug. I take my baby blues, and we're gonna compress that gasket so it doesn't leak when we turn the water back on. Tank to bowl bolts. There's a couple different ways to put them in, depending on the toilet, but for this universal kit, it goes bolt, washer, and then through the opening, and bolt and washer, and repeat through the other two. We'll just set those loosely in place. There's certain toilets that also have like a set washer that go here, and then a nut, and then you can compress it and get it tight. I particularly like it that way the best, but for this universal kit, they don't give you extra washers or nuts. So this is the way you do this one. Now that we got our tank to bowl bolts in, next is our tank to bowl gasket. Tank to bowl gasket goes over the flush valve, sits on there just like that. And last but not least, we got to put our toilet fill valve in. So our toilet fill valve comes pretty much pre-ready to go. I'm gonna flip this around so we can take a look. So remember, this is adjustable a little bit. There's an old water line, which is the water level. And so by twisting, it kind of locks it in place, but we're gonna just set that looks pretty much right. There is a water level, so we can kind of tell without actually telling. Make another adjustment. And then once you find the right spot, there's a lock. It's hilarious, there isn't one in this one. There's no clip to hold it, but that's okay. Since there's no clip, we're just gonna put it in because it locks anyways. So we're gonna leave it locked. Slide that in there like that, spin that around, and retighten the nut on the bottom side. So again, we're gonna hand tighten that. We're gonna take a peek on the other side and make sure that this is oriented in the right way. And once we got that hand tight, we're gonna take a little smaller channel locks and give it a little squeeze. And we are now ready to set this tank back on the bowl. Everything's all put back together. We're gonna take our bowl, line up our tank to bowl bolts, make sure they're all loosely sitting in the holes. And while we're holding it, we're gonna take our nut and washer, and this is the more tricky part. So I'm gonna take it, washer, nut, get that hand tight so that we can do it to the other two sides. I'm gonna have to make some adjustment once we get all three of these on there, just because we wanna tighten this tank down evenly and squish down that tank to bowl gasket. There's 2 and 3. There, you can, I don't think this is the same one. No, I gotta go get a different nut driver real quick. So the biggest thing when retightening the toilet tank to the bowl is making sure that you put it on evenly and making sure that when you're done, it's nice and solid. So you should be good. You don't wanna over tighten your toilet bolts. There is always a chance of your porcelain breaking when you over tighten it. Lastly, but not leastly, the final step is to put on your toilet supply line. So let's come on in and take a look, and I'll show you how to do that. Now that our toilet tank bolts are nice and snug and our tank is level, we got to install our toilet supply line from our fill valve to our flush valve. So this goes right on this bar bend right here, and most of the times they go on okay. You do have to get your hands in there and fight just a little bit. There we go. And this other end gets clipped onto our flush valve. So if water comes out of this tube, and just goes in here, the water level in the bowl will not be enough for a complete flush. There's water that comes out of the bottom of this fill valve that fills up this tank, and this tube goes in through the overflow and fills up the bowl, and that's where you get the correct water levels for a proper flush. So this gets installed and clipped right to the overflow tube. So we have the right amount of water that goes in through the overflow tube, and that fills up the bowl, and then at the bottom of this fill valve, there's water that fills up this tank. When the water that fills up this tank reaches this level, there's a float in here, and that shuts the water off to the tank, causing the toilet to be completely full and ready for a flush. Now our water fill line is hooked up. Lastly but not leastly is removing the links on this chain and hooking it up to our trip lever. So these come in just a general point, and for me, I just take my chain and I hold it up to my trip lever, and then I just subtract the length of this clip, and it's a little bit of a guessing game. Sometimes I got to do it a couple times, but we're gonna go right there. See how that looks, and then we'll clip it into our opening on our trip lever. Even standing up and standing behind this toilet is a little tricky, even though I have complete full advantage for access. Sometimes these things are just not easy. There we go. All right, so I have a little bit of play in the chain, and then I test it to make sure that it's not pulling it up. Maybe it's a little bit high, so we can always make that adjustment once we get the water turned on and test it to make sure it's not leaking. But this is definitely an adjustment that you're going to want to make after your water's back on and after you flush it a couple times. Well, I hope you found this video informative and helpful, and I hope that in your adventures of repairing your own toilet, it'll work and you can save yourself some money. But if you ever need a hand or help, give us a call. I'm John from American Eagle Plumbing. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share this video. Be great.